Call Me Cranky by Christopher Zinn. Bondi Beach, 2026. Narrated by David Tredinnick. They tried to steal you last night, and I was left both angry and sad. Furious when I should have been grateful their assault failed. Maudlin as I realised how hurt I might have been had it succeeded. I'd lost one or two of your predecessors before, but beyond frustration and resignation, I can't recall feeling so emotional about the thefts. It was a criminal fact of life. Rather like falling off a bicycle speeds success on two wheels, we learn the hard way, and losing my two-wheelers has taught me plenty. Fortunately, the strong chain around my latest and most lavish push bike withstood their ardent attempts in that dark, wet street to force its links apart with the mighty leverage of a metal bar. There was no damage. They only made off with the two front lights. I should have been as grateful as I was over 60 years ago when my parents presented us twins with our first red bike to share. It had white wheels and a green bell, and while one twin pedalled, the other could cling on at the back. We soon graduated to two-wheelers with training wheels and practiced the miracle of balance. There were tumbles and grazes, as we lived near steep hills. People complained about the amount of traffic even then. As I careered down the pavement, I had a close scrap with a Morris Minor pulling out of a driveway. Its smoky exhaust alerted me all too late as I pulled like fury on the flimsy brakes and swerved into someone's front garden. The driver gave me a haughty glance and carried on. There were other near misses and two outright collisions in my cycling career, but I wasn't killed or deterred and have never been without a bike. In those days, bikes, like my suburban life, seemed simple. We grew up learning how to fix flat tyres, tighten brakes and straighten handlebars. We were even allowed to cycle to school without our parents being accused of child neglect, as happened once in London. I recalled a study that made sense. It showed that over the years, kids' skills in maintaining bikes have deteriorated to the basics of pumping up the tyres. I've tried to keep up, but disc brakes, derailleur gears, convoluted chains and sprocket sets have been a trial even as they improved performance. On long summer nights, I pedalled out into the countryside for miles alone and in awe of nature. The cycle was simple compared to today's contraptions, but the two of us working together, riding there and back, spawned many happy memories. At university, a bicycle was de rigueur. No one had a car, but there were thousands of bikes leaning on every wall and lamppost to speed students around the city. In my last year, I moved out of college to a farmhouse at the top of a long, grueling hill. Even with the then standard 3-speed gears, I determined the first time up to cycle non-stop. It was early goal setting, and even now, whenever facing some hardship or hurdle, I recall that 19-year-old struggling up the hill every night, like a self-indulgent Sisyphus, and freewheeling down the next day. If I made it then, I can make it now. Accidents did happen, but I never blamed the bike. In pre-helmet days, coming down this very hill, a nurse driving a sedan pulled out in front of me. My brakes were stronger, but the margin of error was shorter, and I slammed into the wheel arch, flew over the bonnet, and slammed headfirst into the stone gutter. I lay, dazed. A passing ambulance pulled up after seeing the gesticulations of the now hysterical driver, who they knew from the nearby hospital. They spent more time calming her down than triaging their patient. I must have a hard head and lived to pedal another day, but the bike was a write-off. More recently, an errant taxi crossed my path and I was thrown to the ground, luckily unhurt but splitting my helmet in two. The car came off worse than my bike. Later, one of my unofficial conditions of employment was that I always lived close enough to cycle to work, often in the early morning hours. It could be bitterly cold or with challenging headwinds, but the journey usually woke me up with a jolt equivalent to any espresso. I have never worn padded pants, used drop handlebars, owned a road bike, or ridden in a pack. I am a modest mountain bike man who sticks to the streets and silently curses the sometimes aggressive and obsessive stance of the so-called mammals, or middle-aged men in lycra. But I will confess, after moving to a new home where it is hot and humid and hilly, I did what I said I'd never do and graduated to an electric bike. I've still held on to my 2 folding bikes and 2 sweat-powered mountain bikes, but I have to admit the addition of a battery has stolen my heart. Hence, when the robbers dared strike and her shackles withstood their attack, I also felt extra proud of her desirability, resilience, and usefulness. My bikes have changed mightily over the decades, but essentially they are the same. Tyres and chains and pedals and cranks set up in a pattern that evolved from the penny farthing. Like most devices, they have been refined and become more complex, faster, and expensive, but they remain recognisable as bikes. I'll leave it to others to discern how my body has changed over the same period. There have been all the obvious external modifications and a few internal extractions, but I want to believe I am much the same, rather like my bikes. When I get on these machines, I experience the same joy I did as a child. You can't put a price on the simple pleasure of cycling downhill without a care. So don't try stealing mine. The end.